that is an amazing dram. Merry Christmas everyone, before I forget. I've got my Christmas dram on the go, and I'll talk about what that is in a little while. So we made it. Another year we've got through the Master of Malt Whisky Advent Calendar. If I do this again next year, there are other options now. There was an Advent Calendar from Whisky Exchange, really good whisky company, which is actually a company if you haven't heard of it. Various people are doing these Advent Calendars now, so if I do this again next year, I will probably give someone else a try, because I'm not sponsored by Master of Malt. It just happens that they do really good samples and calendars. But I think this one's been pretty successful. I think it's been reasonably good value. I think it's probably been better value than, definitely better value than last year's, because it's less than half the price. And most of the stuff that we've got out of this one, it's been younger, more economically produced, but the quality has been more consistent and better value for money. So let's do a little outro, little rundown of the rankings, who have been the winners and the losers this year, and what surprises have we had along the way. So the first one that I'm going to mention is the winner this year, the top place on the leaderboard in my humble opinion at least, and that's the Whisky Malt Spice King. And that's an absolute hidden gem. In my opinion, to my tastes, it's the absolute star of the show this year, and it just shows how amazing an independently bottled blended malt can be. I think that compared to what the other things that we had from the Advent Calendar, it absolutely blows the competition away, and it's also one of the more affordable drams at £38. I don't know if you'll be able to get the one that I had by the time this video comes out and you see this, and whether it'll be in stock, but there is a batch 2 out at the moment. I'm being attacked by a fly, and I haven't had the batch 2, but from the quality of that Spice King 12-year-old, that puts a lot of confidence in my mind about what we're getting from Whisky malts, especially when you consider that I think it was the highest ABV out of the Advent Calendar this year, and it was one of the few-ish that had a proper age statement at 12 years old. Fantastic. I think that Whisky Malts is a company that we need to keep an eye on. Also, absolutely no apologies for dropping a whiskey from my local distillery. Essentially a very similar thing to this English whiskey rum cask. I dropped that into the top 5. Really pleased that we got an English whiskey and a good English whiskey, and from my local distillery. I did debate its position on the leaderboard for quite a long time between that Samuel Gulliver's England's number 6 and the Tamdhu and the Talisker. I think really they are dead even between the three, but I decided to give the advantage, the benefit of the doubt, to the English whiskey from my home distillery, because why not? Other entries that came in towards the top of the leaderboard, I'll put it on screen so you can see it and the list. And like I did last year, I'll put the highly recommended ones in green, the recommended ones in yellow, and the probably shouldn't buy in red. So towards the top we had a Deanston and a Tamdhu and a Mortlach coming in very high on the leaderboard. They all make really great whiskey, so no surprises there. Next up on the list, and one of the two big surprises for me this year, is Talisker 10. So the Talisker 10 sample that I had in the Advent Calendar this year, I didn't even recognise as a Talisker. I thought that the peat was so strong on it that I didn't even consider Talisker as a possible source. I don't know if this is a running thing that you guys have noticed, but this sample of Talisker 10, and I did a comparison to the bottle that I had on my shelf for a while, and it just seems so much more peaty than what I remember getting from Talisker in the past. So I think either there's been some batch variation, or Diageo in their wisdom, infinite wisdom of Diageo, have decided to put more peat into Talisker 10 now. I think that it's still a great whiskey, and it's still fairly priced, although it must be said that it does seem like the price is starting to creep a little bit on Talisker 10. I've seen it in supermarkets a few times recently where it's stated that the original price is in the high 40s, like £48, £49. So maybe that we're about to see some price hikes on the standard expressions of Talisker, which would be an absolute shame. but obviously these days we are very wary of Diageo after they decided to really shaft us with a lot of really steep price hikes on some of their core releases, so probably keep an eye out on that one. Other drams in the advent calendar this year that I thought did really well: new distillery releases. It's no secret that a lot of the distilleries that have popped up in the last few years are doing incredibly well, despite not being around for very long. So I'm talking about releases like Loch Lee and Lindores Abbey. Both of those coming in on the mid-table in the leaderboard. Great that they're putting out such great stuff after such short time, and I guarantee that they will improve. They will continue to get better and better, leaps and bounds over the next 5 years. And in particular, Lindores Abbey and Loch Lee, reviews coming soon on this channel. They are absolutely distilleries to keep an eye out for, as a lot of the new Scottish and English distilleries are. So moving on to another English distillery that we had in the advent calendar this year, The One, which is a brand of blended whiskies sourced and released by the Lakes Distillery up in Cumbria. And that one threw an absolute curveball at me with a Manzanilla cask matured whiskey that honestly, in my opinion, really tastes like gin. To the point where I do have to wonder if there's been some sort of mix-up with the sample in my advent calendar, so it'd be good if you guys could confirm if the tasting notes that I got out of that one, those strong, bitter herbal notes, are similar to what you guys got. So that Manzanilla release from the One blended whiskey range from the Lakes, really not a fan of that one, but Lakes really can do so much better than that, which again I'll talk about in a very shortly upcoming review. As for the second big surprise of the advent calendar this year though, Glendronach. We need to talk about Glendronach. I think when you're judging a distillery, whether it's new or established, I always think it's fair to say you are only as good as your last bottle. So that means that you are judged by what people buy, what people take home and drink. So if you put out crap batches, if you let things slip, if the quality slides over the years or it's up and down one bottle to the next, people will stop praising and stop buying your whiskey. And I've always loved Glendronach. They got quite a lot of flack recently when Ralphie, amongst others, pointed out that they're taking their non-chill filtered statement off their label. If you have a little search on Dramface, there is an article that explains why that happened. And to be fair to Glendronach, they are not the evil bad guys in that situation that a lot of people assumed they are. There was a reason why they took that off the label, and it's not just to screw us over. But Glendronach, going back to what I was saying, I've always really loved them, and I really like that 12-year-old expression. I haven't had it for probably about 5 years, but I always ranked it well up there, nearly as good as the Glendronach 15, that critically acclaimed Glendronach 15 revival. But this recent dram of Glendronach 12 that I had out of the advent calendar, you can tell that it's a Glendronach, but it's really missing that brightness. It's missing that intense Oloroso and PX fruity sherry treatment. It just hasn't got what it used to have. I think that this dram that I had recently, you can tell that it is the same expression, but it's relatively dull, fudgy, and quite nondescript compared to the Glendronach 12 that I remember. I don't know if it's just a bad batch, or if at some point things have gone downhill at Glendronach, but I was disappointed. It really should have been up there, beating the Tamdhu, but as it is, it's barely getting past a 3-year-old sherried whiskey from Loch Lee. So think about that one. Hopefully it is just a bad batch, and hopefully some of you guys that have had Glendronach 12 recently can tell me, has it slipped a little bit, or is it just a bad one-off? Moving on though, World Whisky. And we absolutely saw a few World Whiskies in the advent calendar this year, and I think that generally they're making absolutely incredible progress. Most World Whisky distilleries, including people like Stauning and Macmura, they've not been around for very long. And in particular, I think that the Macmura Limousin and the Stunning Chaos releases show that world whisky and European world whisky is really coming on really nicely. It's much better than what we were getting even 5 years ago, and I really look forward to seeing what they come out with next. I think, and this is just my opinion, that brands like Macmura and Stunning and other European world whiskies, I think that a lot of them are now getting to a point where their whisky is more mature and more of a finished product compared to the clearly young but well-made-ish whiskies that we were getting a few years ago. So I really do predict great things to be coming from them in the near future. This next one, and it wouldn't be a full rundown unless I mention this because there were a few of them, Irish whisky. I think we had 4 different Irish whiskies this year, so they really had a fair chance at impressing us. But out of those 4, I think that the Teeling is really the only one that got anywhere near the top of the leaderboard. And to me, that's not that surprising. I'm not a huge fan, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of modern Irish whisky. It's also not surprising to me that the Teeling was the one that did the best, because I do think that Teeling over in Dublin, they are now the only, well, they were the only Dublin distillery. There's now at least one other opened. But I think that Teeling take whisky making a little bit more seriously than the average Irish distillery. But I would absolutely like to see more from Irish. I'd like to see more of that Irish whisky potential being realised. In particular, I'd like to see more well-made, straightforward, well-matured and well-blended Irish whisky, rather than more of the clearly young, slightly harsh Irish whisky with a ton of oak thrown at it to cover up any flaws. And that's not just at this low point that we're getting these Irish drams from this calendar from. I think that criticism applies to almost the entire range of Irish whisky at all price points. Irish whisky can do so much more than it currently is. And then we have France bringing up the rear. The demon banana strikes again. Bren, what do they call it now? I think it's just Bren single malt. Used to be Bren QV, but when I tried that Bren whiskey, I recognised what it was almost immediately, and that's not because I am a master blind noser and taster. It's because it is a really weird and incredibly unique whiskey, and I didn't like it then, and I don't really like it now. I'm not going to dwell on it, but it's odd, kind of unpleasant stuff. I think that the nose is unique and fairly pleasant with those strong banana-y notes, almost rum-esque notes on the nose, and I think if it tasted how it smells, it would kind of be odd but okay, but it doesn't. I don't like it. Moving on. So I think that's a fairly good run that we've had out of the Advent calendar this year. I think probably around the top 2/3 were what I would call good. And I think apart from a bland blend and a couple of bland Irish whiskies, pretty much all of it was interesting and worth trying. There's a lot of things in there that I wouldn't have bought, even as samples, so it's good to try these things. And anyone that's been tasting along at home, I hope you have had fun, I hope you've learnt something too. But I think the overall take-home message really is that Spice King is king. I think that, to my palate at least, in my humble opinion, I think that we could all do much worse than going out and getting a bottle of that Spice King 12-year-old blended malt from Weems Malts. And I absolutely think that Weems Malts is a company that we all need to be more aware of and keep an eye on their future releases going forward. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Like I said before, we are getting shafted by a lot of the traditional established whisky distilleries and companies, and I put a lot of that blame at the large multinationals that own these companies, because the likes of distilleries like Lagavulin, The people making that stuff, taking the time and putting their blood, sweat and tears into making a wonderful whiskey, they don't want to sell their stuff at 43% and chill filtered and whatever awful other stuff, puppy's tears that they put into it, that they do. They don't want to do that after they've put their life and soul into that whiskey. It's Diageo. And we all know that these companies that are owned by these large companies, they have to do what they're told. And a lot of the time that doesn't result in the best product. If you don't believe me, just look at all the small, independently owned, family owned, community owned distilleries out there. They're all putting out much better presentations. They're giving maximum effort into putting good whiskey in your hands. And that's absolutely the case with this whiskey, this blended malt from Weems Malts. So, as I think I've probably said by now, this is, from my research, a blend of Highland Park and Bunnahabhain. It is lightly peated and it's fantastic stuff. You can expect a full review of this to come out very shortly. Although saying that, I still haven't got around to reviewing the Loch Lomond peated single grain that I gave Whisky of the Year to last year, so we'll see. But no, seriously, great whiskey, and I will get around to doing a full review of this soon. Absolutely, without a doubt, very deserving of being my Christmas dram this year. So what's left? What else can we do? What else can we say? I think that we've done a good job of having a look at the Whisky Advent Calendar. Thank you for anyone that's joined me. Thank you for anyone that's watched all the way through. And absolutely thank you for anyone that tasted along with me. Hope you enjoyed that. But I think we've done just about everything that we can do with that now. So, out with the old. There is something that I've been meaning to do for quite a while, something that I've been looking forward to, and it's something that kind of ties in with what I did last year. Last year, I think it was at the end of the year, I reviewed my... You can't really see it anymore, can you? Especially with that in the way. Where am I going to put that? With all this detritus in the way, I reviewed my peated Infinity bottle. I just noticed, I don't know if you can see all the haze and sediment going around in the bottom of that. Can you see that? I think you can see that. I can see it on my monitor. Just bits floating around. That is flavour. That is flavour and craft presentation. That's whiskey as it should be. But what I was saying, I reviewed the peated Infinity bottle last year, which was fantastic. This year, for the little Whisky Lot Christmas speech, I thought I would break out the unpeated Infinity bottle. A few of you might have realised that I have upgraded my bottle. It was in the cheapo Bracken blended malt whiskey bottle from Lidl before. It's now in this recycled, repurposed bottle from the English Whisky Company. So let's get some of that in a glass. Obviously I haven't tried this one at all yet because it's never been full, which just shows that the vast majority of the whiskey that I buy is at least lightly peated, because anything that's at least lightly peated goes into the peated one. So this is all, there's 1 dram of every unpeated whiskey that I've had in here, which is shocking that after over a year, probably 18 months, it's still never been full. But we can't wait forever. Let's give it a try. Let's put that back over there. Let's wipe that first. I don't want to destroy the table. Hopefully that's not going to fall off. So, colour. Reasonable. There's almost certainly some caramel coloured whiskey's gone in there. Let's give it a little brief review. Sort of a rundown of the year. quite oaky, creamy, vanilla, very Speyside, which is probably not a surprise. I think, off the top of my head, a lot of the unpeated whiskies that I've put in there, there's been quite a few Speysides in there, sort of stereotypical, sort of apple, pear, creamy. There's also a very well-aged note in there. It might be coming through from things like that Black Friday whiskey. You remember that one? A long time ago now. Creamy, appley, sweet, Speyside. Good stuff. Quite a cask influence there. Definitely some tannic, slightly stewed tea notes. You can tell there's been some well-aged stuff gone into there. Finish is a little bit thin, and I think that's probably because I've put probably a couple of too many lower ABVs in there. Probably try to fix that at some point in 2023. As for the nose though, smells wonderful. Tastes good. Finish is a little bit lacking, which probably tells us a lot about the whisky climate in 2022. A lot of oakiness coming through in a lot of whiskies, and a lot of whiskies are a little bit too underpowered for the palate to back up the nose. Pretty good stuff though. I'd say the nose, no. I was going to say it's on par with the Spice King, but it's not. Spice King has got it, because that's got the benefit of that 52% ABV. Whereas this, it's got a little bit more finesse, a little bit more delicate, and a bit more complexity. Very nice on the palate. You'd probably be happy to pay £50 a bottle for that. But it could be better. Definitely need some more high ABV unpeated malts in there. So I'm going to go off and enjoy the rest of Christmas Day. I'm going to go and enjoy my 2 Christmas drams there. I hope you've enjoyed the Advent calendar. Let me know what you thought. Agree, disagree, indifferent. And if you've got any Infinity bottles on the go, let me know how yours are coming along. Thanks for watching, and cheers.